Hey everyone, it's Dr. Andrew Orr here. Look, I thought I'd come on today and talk to you all about a pretty important subject, seeing that a lot of you are about to embark on things like surgical intervention or already have had surgical intervention. And I wanted to talk to basically people what you need to know about surgery and what you need to do afterwards, because it's really important. And a lot of people, there's a lot of misperceptions about surgery and surgical intervention. A lot of people put it off. There's lots of negative connotation around surgery and why people put it off as well. But the long and short of it really is, at the end of the day, there is a point where no matter what you do, you may need to have surgery. And the reason I'm talking about this is that I've just had my 8th operation. And the last operation that I've just had recently, which is only just last week, and this week I'm sort of still recovering to a point again, and then I'll get back to that with expectations around recovery. The reason why I thought I'd talk about it is that it's really important to share from my journey so that people know where I come from and why I understand pain and why I understand chronic disease processes and the work that needs to go into repairing and healing and ongoing management is because I have to do it too. But the reason why I also wanted to talk about it, I've recently had friends that really desperately need surgery and have put it off and been guilted into putting it off with all sorts of, let's face it, multi-level marketing and diets and snake oils, as they call them. And I use complementary medicines and I use a multimodality approach and so forth. But, there's a point where you can do everything. And when something's not working or not giving, you have to then turn around to the miracles of modern science and realize that if you're at a point where you're in pain or you can't stop bleeding, your lifestyle's affected, like for me, started getting constant headaches and dizziness and pain and, like I used to say to people, it felt like I had a hangover, but the worst hangover you ever had, but times it by 10, and then add in excruciating migraine on top of it, and that's about as close. You're coming pretty close. So let's talk about pain too. Pain's relative. It doesn't matter what pain you're in or how your pain starts. Pain is pain. And the whole object is get you out of pain. And sometimes the only way to get someone out of pain is surgical intervention. And people say, well, how does that so? Well, if you've got a pelvis full of adhesions and your pelvis full of, and endometriosis and a uterus full of adenomyosis, or you've got a big cyst, or let's face it, even the worst of it could be, cancer and all kinds of stuff. Or in my case, a head full of adhesions, pus, infection, and a heap of old scar tissue and a disease process growing in there, very much like endometriosis. You cut it out, grows back, cut it out, grows back, and because it's genetic, it's what it is. It's a genetic process that there's no cure for. So it's called management and proper management. That gets me back to something I've always talked about is proper surgical intervention and why that people need to see an advanced trained surgeon. Now, I talk about advanced trained surgeons a lot, especially in gynecology, because a lot of people haven't seen an advanced trained surgeon. And not every gynecologist is an advanced trained surgeon either. Now, this is not a slight on anyone at all. If anyone thinks there's a negative of this, there is not a negative. This is about the facts. It's not a negative on anyone at all. The fact is that in every profession, we have people that are highly specialised in a certain area, and that's what they do, and that's what they do only. It's the same in medicine. And it's the same in surgical interventions too. We've got people that can do surgery, but fairly basic surgery. And then we got some that can do intermediate surgery and a little bit more than basics. And then we've got people that are highly specialised and they're advanced trained and they do so many hundreds of surgeries a year and they're the top specialists there are. Same goes for any area, just like the one that I've seen, my 8th one, I've finally seen like an advanced surgeon. And, you know, before I thought I was having pretty much all that could be done, and then to work out that I haven't, that there's actually something extra in an extensive surgery. So my previous surgeries last probably under about half an hour, which is about the same for a lot of laparoscopies. But this time I was under for 3 hours, 3 hours under anaesthetic, lots of drilling, lots of widening and cleaning up and tidying up. And this is what we need for a lot of women that have got pelvic inflammatory disease, endometriosis, and you know, multiple adhesions through the pelvis, and then multiple other chronic disease processes going on at the same time. So this is where surgery can help exponentially, and it needs to be looked at. And then we get to things like adenomyosis. Like I recently had a friend, you know, that's being guilted into a point where, you know, honestly, I've sort of tried everything from, was told, do diet and then do this and put it on Facebook again, oh, I'm feeling tired today, blah, blah, blah. Well, you got to do this and that and that. And then all these miracle cures come in. And I remember I had to set her down and say, look, you've done every single one of those and it's still not working and you're hemorrhaging and your quality of life is diminishing. And you've got to stop listening to these untrained people, because I'm sorry, but your friends and your Facebook friends aren't healthcare professionals. And I don't mean it badly either. I'm always about people trying everything they can. Honestly, try anything you can. But there's a point. There's a point. There is a point where you're actually harming yourself by not seeing a trained individual and someone that can help you properly. You're actually hindering and self-sabotaging to a point. But I also know where the guilt and everything comes in, as I saw with this friend of mine. And I had to sit her down and say, hey, look, enough's enough. You've got to go and see a surgeon. I'm going to book you in. I'm going to book you into an advanced trained friend of mine, and you're going to have a talk to him, and you're going to go and get your life back and stuff what anyone else says, because without this operation, you aren't going to have a life. And that's basically where I got to recently, that even leading up to my own surgery, I wasn't having much of a lot. I was going to where I can function because I've learned how to manage pain for a long time. So pain management through it. So when people poo-poo pain management through psychology and mindfulness and all that kind of stuff, I'd put them in their place very firmly and say, I'm sorry, but you can reduce pain and you can have pain management through learning how to deal with pain and shutting pain down to a point. Even for myself, there was to a point where I just couldn't do that anymore. I mean, I can, and I managed it very, very well, but there's a point where I went, yeah, this is starting to get to a point where even I can't really shut this mentally anymore. And I'm very good at it. But you know what I mean? Those techniques have still got me a long way. So it doesn't mean you don't do them. Don't get me wrong. They're a big part of your healthcare management and repair process. So there's all that as well, which I'll touch on in a little while in part 2 of this. But the first part I'd like to say to people is that sometimes you need to go and have a surgical intervention, and surgical intervention is a very needed process. And without it, you're not going to get out of pain. You're not going to have your disease managed properly. And let's face it, the real management then happens afterwards. And I'm going to talk about that in part 2. But the first step, when you get to a point where pain medications aren't working, where pain strategies to try and shut down those pathways, those pain pathways through mindfulness, through working with a psychologist, through techniques, through calming the body, all that kind of stuff, with that, and then medications aren't working, or your medications are increasing, then increasing risk of opioid addiction because then your medication's going up, or you're just not, you're sitting at home and not being managed at all, and then all your symptoms are getting worse, then it means you need surgical intervention. And you need to be really real about it, that there's only so much medications and all that can do. The other thing I see where people go wrong is that they have the surgery and they have this perception that surgery is going to fix them. No, the surgery is not going to fix you. The surgery is going to take away your temporary pain. It can manage active disease that's actively present. But if that active disease that's actively present can grow back, it will grow back if you don't manage it. And the whole idea is to manage that process. And that's what happens to a lot of people. They go and have the surgery, no, don't do anything about it, they go away. And some of that's not through their own management, by the way. Some of that is through people they've seen that have gone in, they've done a laparoscopy, whatever, and then never seen them again. And not told them they have to go and do management afterwards. So there's a big problem. And that's what I wanted to address, and also wanted to talk about as someone that's actually been through it, so that people understand that I understand what you go through. I don't understand your particular thing, well, unless you've got exactly what I've got. But I understand what it feels like to have stomach cramps that, like I said, my head was full of pus and dripping into my stomach feeling upset. And like I said, it's worse than hangover. I wish I had a hangover because then I know where to go. But when you wake up with that every day and you're getting to a point where it's just getting worse and worse and worse, I said to people, like even a migraine, I wish I had a migraine and know how to go on a day. This is worse than a migraine. It's like a hangover times 10. But again, it shows that with the right management, you can still live a life. You can still do things and should be functioning as a normal human being. But there also comes a time that with everything, no matter what you're doing, it doesn't mean it's not working. It's worked to a point because it's managed you to a point where you can function in society. But there comes a point too, if you can understand my reasoning here, is that you get to a point where you go, right, I do need surgical intervention. One of the things I always say to people too is, first surgery should be the best surgery. That's why it's important to see the best up front. And hopefully you won't have to have any more surgery after that, or you might need one or so after that. Not like me that ends up with 8 because I haven't had the right surgery done in the first place. So now I hopefully have. It's been cleaned out to a point I've never had before. The recovery process I'm going to talk about in the next section in stage 2. And I just wanted to bring this to light because I don't want someone sitting at home going, oh, I don't want to go and have another laparoscopy, or I don't want to go and have surgery, and I'll just go and do this or that. And there's a point. People die around the world without surgery. People are in pain around the world without surgery. And if something can get you out of pain, and let's face it, day surgery these days, a lot of stuff on laparoscopically, then you need to do it. And if you don't do it, then you're creating your own suffering. And it is far worse for you to be sitting there suffering in pain and pain receptors going off and inflammation and all that sitting there that could be dealt with. This is what these people do, but you need to see the right people, and you need to make sure that you see a highly trained surgeon, not just anyone. And I've talked about this often, many, many, many times, and I'll talk about it again. And I hope this helps all of you understand that as well. I'll talk about the management process in the second part of this, and I hope you listen to that as well. Take care, everyone.